Hi, I'm Janelle Scott. I'm a professor in the Graduate School of Education and the Department of African American Studies at the University of California at Berkeley. So my main interests, I would say broadly, would be the politics of education, politics of K-12 education. Specifically, I'm very interested in the interaction between elite advocacy of educational policy and grassroots advocacy of educational policy, and where they meet and where they detract from one another. And these days I've been looking at that in the context of charter schools and school choice reform more broadly. I've been doing some work on what's been called venture philanthropy, which is it's a newer form of philanthropy that's still very much being defined, but in general it's understood to be foundations that have started fairly recently in the late 90s, early 2000s, and how these organizations distinguish themselves from traditional philanthropy is that they see themselves as much more aggressive, much more engaged in grant making, which they call investments as opposed to grant making, and very explicit about a policy agenda. And part of that comes from a critique they have about traditional philanthropy as being too conservative in terms of not approaching more radical solutions to public education problems, not effective in any kind of scalable way. And so they really respond to what they see as a failure of traditional philanthropy in being much more engaged. And so what I'm interested in is the role that venture philanthropy has played in scaling up and growing the charter school movement in the last 5 or 6 years. My hope is that my work helps to ask questions and raise issues that traditional policy analysis does not do. So my concern is not so much whether something's working, which traditional sort of program evaluation policy research does. They want to know whether it works, and I don't disparage that work at all. I think a lot of it is incredibly important. I also think it's important to ask who's creating the policies and why, because we have a long history, a pretty significant research base that says several things matter for increased educational equity, things like class size, things like resources, things like teacher preparation and meaningful ongoing professional development. And many of those components are missing from many of the aspects of charter school policy and school choice policy more broadly. And so I hope that my research helps to ask some very important questions about the kinds of schools we're creating, who's kind of driving the creation of that, and how we should understand then community participation in those reforms given this broader context of who's shaping policy.